Almost as important as tea processing is tea harvesting. As you may know, simply growing the teas can be a major challenge for the farmers, and it takes years to perfect. Finally, after all the work farmers have put into growing tea, it comes time to pick the leaves. The tea harvest is something that comes just a few times a year, and it can actually determine the quality of a tea in many cases. The quality of a tea is not just determined by how the tea is grown and processed, but also how it's picked. In this video, we're going to walk you through the tea harvest and explain to you everything that you need to know about it. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea, but for this episode, we're going to focus on the tea harvest specifically. If you would prefer to read about the tea harvest, you can check out our blog at neoteas.com. We'll leave the link to the article in the description below. Without further ado, let's get started. What is tea harvesting? Harvesting tea leaves is an important stage in the tea production process. A farmer can greatly change the flavor of a tea by harvesting tea leaves from different parts of the tea plant or at different times. This is one of the many calculations a farmer needs to make in order to improve the flavor of the tea he produces and to maximize the yield of his tea field. Harvesting tea leaves is just like harvesting the leaves of any other plant. You want to ideally pick the leaves at the stem so it doesn't really interfere with the integrity of the leaf itself. Tea harvesting can require a lot of skill and it can be a full-time job. For a tea like Gyokuro, for example, one of the most prized leaf teas in Japan, you need to pick the top 3 leaves of the tea plant. These are the sweetest in flavor and the highest in nutrients. You first need to identify the top 3 leaves of the tea plant, and then you need to grasp the stem of the tea plant a few millimeters below the 3rd leaf. You can then gently pull up until you hear a small pop sound and the leaf should be separated. This method of harvesting tea leaves is extremely time consuming, but it can yield great quality green tea. How many times can you harvest tea in a year? Harvesting tea leaves is something that can happen up to 4 times per year. After the tea is harvested for the first time in early spring, it then can be harvested a second time in June or July. Tea from the second harvest is the second highest in nutrients and flavor, so it's often used for more inexpensive teas. Farmers may also combine leaves from the first and second harvest to lower the price of a tea, while still providing plenty of flavor. During the summertime, the temperatures in Japan can get quite hot, so it's a lot of work to harvest during this time. The tea plant can be harvested a 3rd time in the late summer, but this is really more common in southern Japan. The 3rd harvest of the plant will produce very low quality tea that is lower in nutrients. The tea plant needs sufficient time to pull nutrients from the soil, and when it's harvested in such a short amount of time, it's unable to produce as strong of a flavor. In mid-October or mid-November, some tea plants will be harvested for a 4th and final time. This is known to some as akibansha, or fall harvest. Some farmers choose to sell this tea to customers, but farmers like Mr. Watanabe in Yakushima have a different plan for the leaves. He harvests the leaves in the fall, but actually uses them as a fertilizer for the plant. His thought behind this is that the tea plant has absorbed nutrients from the soil all year, so now it must return some at the end of the year. How are the best leaves selected? If you are producing a premium quality Japanese green tea, it has to come from the first harvest. The tea plant is harvested for 4 times from April all the way to November, and the quality greatly declines with each harvest. After the last tea harvest in November, the tea plant has all winter to build up nutrients, and it releases those nutrients into the first sprouts of the springtime. These fresh spring sprouts are the most flavorful, and therefore they command the highest price. Tea picked during the first harvest is called shincha, and it's one of the highest regarded teas in Japan. Serious tea drinkers will wait around all year to be among the first to purchase the new shincha harvest in springtime. This practice used to be more common decades ago, but now with the widespread use of refrigeration, the tea can be kept fresh all throughout the year. Shincha tea, like the shincha from Mr. Nuruki, can be quite flavorful, with a light, sweet, and savory flavor. Once fall comes around in Japan, it becomes especially important for farmers to fertilize their tea crop. The soil must be set up for the long winter ahead so the tea plant can rest and absorb nutrients ahead of the spring harvest. A lot of farmers will use a type of straw on the base of the tea plants. This serves a few important purposes. First, it allows the tea plant to retain moisture by locking in water. It also fertilizes the tea plant and keeps the roots warm through the winter. After a long winter, the sprouts of the tea plant will begin to come up in the spring, and soon they are able to be harvested. The most common way to harvest the tea plant in Japan is with this motorized tea harvesting machine. This is the most efficient way to harvest the tea, and it's one of the reasons why the tea plant are organized into these neat rows. The harvester will trim these hedges, and over time they will develop a neatly carved shape. This machine is essentially a combine that can drive between the rows of the tea plant and automatically harvest them. The advantage of the mechanical tea harvester is that it is much faster than the handheld tea harvester. It simply skims the top of the tea bush to trim the top leaves of the tea plant and collect them into a net. The downside of the mechanical tea harvester is that it's not as accurate. Because the mechanical tea harvester is so large, it's very difficult to control, so you can't be as precise with the harvesting as you can be with hand picking. You want larger leaves in the case of Gyokuro and Sencha, and as long as the leaves look good, the tea harvester must work just fine. Occasionally tea like matcha and Gyokuro will be made made with hand-picked tea leaves. This method of tea harvesting is extremely expensive in Japan, but the benefit is that the leaves are picked perfectly. On one day out of the year, people from all around the town will gather on this field to pick the fresh sprouts of the tea plant. There's a precise method to their picking. They want to select the top 3 leaves of the tea plant, so they will pick slightly underneath the 3rd leaf. Once the leaf has been picked, they will drop it into their basket and look for the next one. If a farmer wants to produce a more inexpensive tea like bancha, they will select leaves lower down on the tea plant, along with some stems as well. This method of tea harvesting can give the farmer a much higher yield. The leaves are much more mature and they are not quite as flavorful. The more mature leaves of bancha are lower in caffeine and they can produce quite a pleasant citrusy flavor with notes of cereal, popcorn, and wood. As you can see, the harvest can be an important factor in determining how prized the tea is. Depending on when it's picked, how it's picked, and where on the tea plant it's picked, the tea can be in a completely different category. If you're interested in checking out some of the fresh teas harvested in the spring, you can browse our selection of Shinsha tea. We just got in the newest batch of Shinsha teas from this year, and you can check them all out on our website, neoteas.com. You may enjoy these early picked Shinsha teas because of their sweet and delicate flavor profiles. Try them all out and let us know which one is your favorite. Thank you all so much for watching this video on tea harvesting. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Again, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel and also check our blog at neoteas.com. Until then, we'll see you next time.